Real quiet.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
I think we'll go ahead and get started. My name is John Gaddis, and I am on the leadership circle of Indivisible Central Ohio. And on behalf of Indivisible Central Ohio, I want to thank you all for coming to our event today, our state budget forum. It's a nice Saturday. You could be anywhere else. I'm glad you chose to spend an hour or two with us. I'd also like to thank our panelists who have taken time from their day to join the panel and talk to us about the state budget, and I'm sure we'll hear quite a bit from them about what is wrong with the state budget and what we can do to help fix it. I'm being optimistic, okay? Just wanted to start with a couple announcements about our next couple big events. The next event like this we're having is on Saturday, May 31st at the Westgate auditorium. Some individuals from our group are planning a town hall focused on the 15th district and might carry. And so if you're in the 15th district especially, we hope you can join us for that event. And then after that, June 14th, Saturday, June 14th is National Day of Defiance and mobilization against the Trump administration. And Indivisible Central Ohio is planning to march together in the Pride Parade, because it also is Columbus Pride, and do voter registration along the route. And so we hope that you will join us in that effort as well. We are having a voter registration training. Before that, let me see what day it is. I think it's June 9th. Yeah, it is Monday, June 9th. And so you can go to our website, indivisiblecentralohio.org, and find that information and sign up and come out and join us. So with that, I'm going to pass it to the panel. And so for starters for the panel, I'd like the panel, if you could introduce yourself and tell us what the biggest issue is that you're concerned about in this budget.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing today? Good afternoon, everybody. How y'all doing today? First off, I want to give a round of applause to our Indivisible Central Ohio group, our organizers. Can y'all give them a round of applause, please? I'm sorry, I started standing up. Then I was standing up. I apologize. I'm short, so I want y'all to see me. Okay. My name is Dontavius, Jarrells. I just so happen to be a state representative representing Ohio's House District 1. You actually are in my district. Myself, alongside Senator Hearcel, represent this part of the area. I also represent all of Central Ohio. So if you're in my office, I'll say, look out the window. Everything that the light touches, Simba's mine. Anything the shadow touches, don't go there. It's one of somebody else's district, okay? So I'm really excited to be here. I also serve as assistant minority leader of the House Caucus. And I'm just proud to work on behalf of each and every one of you. If you have not had a chance to meet me yet, I'm looking forward to meeting each and every one of you. I will have to leave a little early because I'm also keynoting our Ohio Environmental Council's Rain Gala tonight. So we're talking about all things removing lead service lines out of Ohio. So I'm excited about that. The thing that I wanted to give to you all today, the thing I hate the most, there's a lot of things I hate in this budget, but the one that I wanted to call attention to is something that's really personal to me. They zeroed out the lead mitigation line out of the Ohio Department of Health from $7 million a year, so $14 million total to zero. And the Lead Safe Home program, it literally went to $250,000 a year. Why is that crazy? Because as a lead poison survivor out of Cleveland, Ohio, there are so many young people and families who are living and drinking with tainted water all across the state. We have an infrastructure problem in Ohio. In fact, in Cleveland, 90% of the homes were built before 1978. And so when we think about the quality of water and how it impacts someone's neurological, cognitive abilities, and then how that then ends up impacting people's ability to be educated, how they get to work, whether or not they can succeed, right? It is a domino effect, and the root cause is the lack of infrastructure. And so zeroing out this fund means that we're likely going to see more families drinking tainted water. And so it is something that I want to call attention. It doesn't probably rise to the surface of headlines. There's a lot of other things that my colleagues are going to talk about that does. But when we talk about the quality of life for Ohioans, the fact that we can't even know whether the water coming out our faucet truly is the cleanest it can be is a problem for all of us to be aware of. Thank you all.
That's such a tough act to follow. I guess I'm gonna stand since we're starting this trend. So good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kathryn Poe. I use they them pronouns. I am the budget and health researcher at Policy Matters Ohio, and I'm also a graduate student in bioethics at the University of Wexner Medical Center at Ohio State. And I think the thing that I'm the most concerned about in this budget is, as a budget researcher, I think a lot about not only how the state raises its money, but how federal dollars interact with our state budget. And it's a lot. Certain programs are very, very influenced by federal dollars. And so what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now with the federal cuts will impact Ohioans and their ability to get access to really important programs. One of those is Medicaid, another one is childcare. And this federal impact is going to span a lot and across a lot of different kinds of programs. And so right now, I'm tracking the reconciliation budget and really thinking about its impact on the current state budget that everyone in this room is working on. And so that is really my big concern. How are those federal cuts going to impact across the entire state budget, our current programs, and our ability to make sure that the people in this room get what they need? So.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm State Rep Anita Somani. I am an OBGYN that still practices. Give it up obstetrics because the little nice stuff will come. But I'm at the State House, obviously representing Worthington, Clintonville, Northeast Ohio. And I am on the Health and Medicaid committees. I'm the ranking member on health. And to me, the budget is about killing Ohioans. It is literally like, I hate Ohio, and I want to see how many people I can kill budget. Because and I say that with it's real. And I say that because I don't think people recognize 1 out of 5 women rely on Medicaid for their prenatal care. 1 out of 4 nationally rely on Medicaid, and our nursing homes rely on Medicaid. 60% of the money that goes to nursing homes comes from Medicaid. If we see the federal cuts that are projected to happen, it will influence Ohio to the tune of about $3 billion and will force rural hospitals to close, which has already happened. We have maternity deserts. We see people coming from all over Ohio for prenatal care, and it will force physicians to leave the state. And with the defunding of Planned Parenthood, it will impact our access to reproductive care, including birth control, STI screening, and other things that Planned Parenthood provides, like breast cancer and cervical cancer screening. So it is imperative that we speak out and let our federal representatives know, and also our Senate, who our Senator Craig is definitely working on improving the budget. But I think from a doctor standpoint and a state representative standpoint, the health and Medicaid cuts are going to impact our kids. It's going to impact our food bank's ability to provide food. And the continuous enrollment for kids from 0 to 3, when we see developmental issues and stuff, will be cut. Work requirements are their excuse for cutting Medicaid. But let me tell you from my experience, people are working 2 and 3 jobs.
Come on, say that.
Because of corporate welfare and the fact that companies like Amazon and what other companies do people work for? Walmart. You know, those are companies that don't give their employees enough hours or make healthcare unaffordable. So those people who are working 2 and 3 jobs, they're working as waitresses, they're working in coffee shops, they're working in retail or in the factories, they cannot afford the health care, and they rely on Medicaid for health care. So it's not about work requirements, it's certainly not about people, and this agenda truly is about hurting people. So thank you.
All right, we're going to
do this again. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. No, see, I feel like y'all could do better than that. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. All right, that sounds good. Well, I am State Representative Latyna M. Humphrey. I have the current pleasure of representing Ohio's 2nd House District. So that encompasses East Columbus, South Columbus, City of Whitehall, and then I have some of those surrounding cities. I gotta say, I'm super excited to be here with you all. Very quickly, because I know we got a long panel, I'll tell you what concerns me the most about the budget. I cannot just name one thing because there are multiple things that directly impact Ohioans, but I want to be clear that directly impact my constituency. And so the first thing I would like to talk about is the Medicaid trigger that would automatically kick almost 1 million people off of Medicaid. Are most vulnerable, the least of these. I thought we said we cared about people when we came to the State House to serve people, but this bill here says that we'd rather pay for a stadium for the Cleveland Browns that they may not even win in, but opposed to making sure that people have adequate health care. So that's number one. And then number two, the thing that I struggle with the most is the failure to properly fund public education. Because right now, when you look at how when we look at how public education or schools are funded, they're constitutionally funded only or unconstitutionally funded, but underneath this formula at 60%. If we get rid of that, God knows what will happen to our schools. If we're not funding our schools appropriately, just think what, I'm going to speak for Columbus City and Whitehall because that's what I represent. Just think about what our schools would look like. If you think about what they look like in comparison to an Olentangy, and then think about if we don't properly fund schools in the next few years and we constantly put the burden back on to taxpayers, and they have to make choices about whether they want to support their babies or be able to stay in their homes, after a while, folk get tired. And so we have a responsibility to properly fund schools so that way, one, our babies are getting their education, but then also thinking about ways we keep our seniors in their homes. And then finally, the thing that bothers me the most is this failure to really look at child care expansion. Because when you look at the governor's proposed budget, when we talk about child care expansion, they gutted all of that. What he wanted to do was to allow for more people to receive child care. When you look at child care now, Title 20 and all those other things, I was a recipient of Title 20. I have a 12-year-old son, and so I had Title 20, and I know what it did for the least of these, and I know how it helped me. But think about if we were able to expand it, how much we could help more people. If women, if families, if parents don't have access to child care, what's going to happen? They're not going to be in the workforce. If we're not giving them the supports to go to work, and know that their babies are safe while they're at work, they're not going to be in the workforce. And so there are lots of things that I struggle with this budget, but I can't wait to dissect it with all of my colleagues here. But again, thank you all so much for having me.
I made the mistake of sitting next to my incredible colleague, Rep. Humphrey, who I have to speak after. But my name is Beryl Brown, Piccolantonio. I'm the proud state representative of House District 4. I live in Gahanna. I represent Gahanna, Blacklick, Westerville, Franklin County part of Westerville, and Franklin County part of New Albany, and a little bit of Columbus in between. I am grateful to the organizers for putting this together. Any opportunity that we can talk with folks about the budget is a good opportunity for us. The budget, and we'll get into this a little bit, but we're still in process with the budget, so my hope is that you take what you hear in here and talk with your friends, your family about this, because there's still impact that we can have. There are a lot of things about this budget that cause me a lot of distress, but the issue that brought me to the legislature is public education, and that is the piece of the budget that is giving me the most concern. So prior to my role as a state representative, I served as school board president in Gahanna for 8 years. I believe firmly that the thing that makes our country unique is that we say that every single one of us has an opportunity, but there is no opportunity if we're not at least providing all people, matter their zip code, no matter the kind of house that they come from, a good quality education. So in the 1990s, when our Ohio Supreme Court said that the way that we were funding our schools was unconstitutional, at that time, the state was paying an average state share of 42%. And the Ohio Supreme Court said that 42% was not enough in order to provide an equitable education across the state of Ohio. We were relying too much on local property taxes to make up the rest when we were only at 42%. In 2025, when the governor proposed his budget would have had us at 32%.
Whoa.
I mean, it's outrageous to me, and so coming into the budget process, we knew there was going to be a lot of work to be done to get us to where we needed to be. Unfortunately, what the Republican majority did is that they took the very first and bipartisan constitutional funding model that we have, and they tossed it in the shredder. The numbers that are in this budget right now are truly pulled almost out of thin air, and the way that the budget is written, it would prohibit us from relying on that constitutional funding model. I don't know about all of you, but I'm sure that you can think about a teacher or some experience that you had growing up in school that changed the trajectory of your life for the better. One of the teachers who had that impact on me is actually here today. I didn't know she was going to be here, but Julie Bruner was a social studies teacher, retired social studies teacher, but she was also the mock trial advisor. And I didn't say this, but by trade, I'm an attorney. And honestly, participation in that program is one of the single biggest impacts on my life. Wow. So education can change somebody's life. And if we as a state are not choosing to invest in the things that give people actual opportunity, if we are not living up to the clearest funding mandate that we have in our Ohio Constitution, then I'm not sure what we're doing.
Well, good afternoon. My name is Nick Bates. I'm a deacon and service director of the Hunger Network in Ohio. We work with faith communities across the state, those groups that are running food pantries and clothing closets and soup kitchens and other programs, knowing that our private charity is needed, but it will never be a replacement for a public commitment to address poverty and hunger and the need in our communities. So we work to try to elevate those voices of those who are experiencing hunger, those who volunteer each and every day and accompany those who are struggling to make ends meet, to lift up their voices collectively on issues like the state budget. This is my 7th or 8th budget that I've been doing state budget policy and advocating for a more morally just and equitable budget. So the biggest thing that I see in this budget is there is absolutely no vision. There have been many budgets I've worked on where I might not have agreed with the vision or the direction that it was taking, but you could see a plan. You could see an ideology saying, here's how I think we can solve problems. I disagreed with it. Largely throughout many years, the budget. Does anybody know how many times we've cut state income taxes in Ohio over the past 20 years? Wendy's not allowed to answer. Neither is Kathryn. Anybody know how many times we've cut state income tax rates in Ohio in the past 20 years?
Too many.
Too many. Good answer. 13 times.
Wow.
13 times in 20 years. How many have felt that in their pocketbook? I haven't.
Yeah.
Because what would we see on the other side? We've seen local communities, our local school districts, not receive the investment they need. And that leads to them having to raise sales tax and property tax that hits everyday Ohioans and those who are struggling the most to make ends meet, puts the burden onto us, away from the wealthy Cleveland Browns owners who can afford to be paying a little bit more of their fair share. So this budget has no vision. We see no new investments into anti-hunger programs, even though we see hunger going up. Did you know that we held hunger flat during the pandemic? Because we saw the investment. We came together as a national community and said, we don't want people going into the workplace right now, so we're going to make sure they can still feed their families. But what have we seen since that time? the elimination of the federally funded universal school meal program, the walk back of the child tax credit, and all these other things have been walked back, and now we're seeing the rate of hunger elevate because we're dealing with the impact of the inflation, the post-pandemic inflation. Families are struggling. So we need more investments in anti-hunger programs. Also, this budget, for some unbeknownst reason, I did not hear this brought up once in any committee hearing around the Ohio Housing Trust Fund.
Yeah.
They took, if you ever buy a house or refinance a mortgage, you know those fees that you never really look at what they are, but you just pay them because they say you have to? A little chunk of that goes into the State Housing Trust Fund. That invests in programs to build houses, homeless shelters, put ramps on a senior citizen's house so that grandma can keep living in her house for another 20 years and be an asset to that community instead of having to go off to live in a nursing home, right? Good things that are funded out of this trust fund. For some reason, in the 11th hour of the House budget process, they said, nope, we're gonna just take that trust fund funding and send it to the counties to do whatever they want with. So instead of having one administrative body set up to run the housing trust fund at the state level, are we now gonna have 88? That doesn't seem very efficient or effective to me if that's the goal. It also then leaves many rural and smaller counties gonna be struggling to have any level of investment. It's also gonna create barriers to county collaboration. You know, especially in our rural communities, Southeast Ohio, we have a lot of multi-county collaborations that apply as a group to the Ohio Housing Trust Fund to invest in their programs locally. So I don't know why in a budget when what are the needs people are complaining about? Inflation, about not enough safe, decent, and affordable housing and all these things. And what are we doing? We're turning our back completely on them. So if I had to summarize, this budget has no vision.
Hello, everybody. My name is Anita Chapman, and I am humbled to be a part of this panel. Also, kind of upset that I chose to sit all the way down here instead of up there. I was trying to avoid the camera, but as you see, it moves. My name is Anita Chapman. I'm here representing Honesty for Ohio Education, and Honesty is a nonpartisan statewide coalition that champions honest education, affirmation of identities and cultures, and local control in education. I'm not from Central Ohio. I'm from Cuyahoga County, and specifically in Berea, where Baldwin-Wallace University is. And I'm a first-generation American and first-generation college graduate. My parents, my older brothers, were immigrants from Cuba, and I grew up in Miami, Florida, and I moved to Ohio in 1994. I've actually lived here longer now than I did in Florida, even though I consider that home. It was before Florida was as crazy as it is now. I'm the proud mother of 3 public school, high school graduates, 2 of which have gone on to graduate from public universities, and one is, the baby is a sophomore at Bowling Green. My husband and I have both been public school elementary music teachers for 32 years, and our daughter is now a teacher as well. I've also worked as a professional volunteer. A lot of you probably know what that is. Basically means you don't get paid to do stuff. Starting in the PTA when my daughter was in kindergarten, and then serving all the way through to be president of the Ohio PTA. And then I couldn't get enough of volunteering, so I served on my local school board for 12 years. Like Beryl. So the budget concerns for me is currently public education. I see the budget as proposed by the House could lead to the end of public schools in the state. That in combination with what's happening in DC. This budget is giving more money to private school vouchers and taking money away from public schools. The loss of the Fair School Funding Plan, which was a bipartisan effort that was started 4 years ago. It was supposed to be phased in over 6 years. And the 3rd phase was supposed to start with this new biennium, and the House budget completely gets rid of that. There's a revenue cap for school districts not being allowed to have more than 30% of their budget, saved, which they've been told for years that they need to do, and now they'll be penalized for that. And even the effort to get rid of property taxes through a ballot initiative statewide, how are schools going to be funded then? I mean, they shouldn't be funded through property taxes anyway, but then what's going to happen? 50% of levies across the state just last week failed, and 50% failed in November as well. Communities are taxed out,
Yep.
and the state isn't paying its share to educate the 90% of Ohio students who attend public schools. So we need to stand up for public education.
Good afternoon. I'm in the enviable position of being last. But the scripture says that the last shall be first. Let me thank you for the awesome privilege of being with you this evening. I will say to you unequivocally and unabashedly that this panel of folks, I'm so honored to be with all of them. And I appreciate them for being here today, because this subject, and for all of you being here today, it's already been stated. You could be a lot of places on a Saturday afternoon. But these issues are so compelling, they're so serious, and that's not hyperbole to say. I'm in the Senate. I'm State Senator Hearcel Craig. This is the 15th Senate District. I represent the assistant leader is in this House district. Also, Representative Humphrey is in my Senate district, and then we have Representative Mohamed further north. There are 3 House districts in the Senate district. I don't know, again, that we can pick one issue. Yeah. Yesterday at 4:00 p.m., my caucus just presented their amendments to I serve on the Finance Committee, to the appropriate parties. I had 125 amendments to that budget. 125 amendments. There are no single issues, but I will say to you, and I say quite clearly, I'm a first-generation college graduate. My mother came here cleaning houses as a maid. And for me to be standing here today, in fact, I wrote my master's thesis upstairs on the 3rd floor of this library. Education is vital. You were absolutely clear about this, the opportunity for the legislature to do it. We got the House budget, which we're deeply troubled by, but they worked as hard as they could to make sure that you had the resources that you need. Election has consequences. We all know that. That's why you are here, indivisible, because of the serious nature of where we're at right now. But the other issue that is compelling to me is this issue about access to affordable housing.
Yeah.
I've traveled this state in the last 6 months, all over the state. Certainly the urban areas, suburban areas, but also the rural areas, where children and families were sleeping in cars. That's not okay.
No.
And so we have lots of work to do in that space. We take it very, very seriously. We can't do this work in a silo or a vacuum. That's why we're here today, really to listen to you. We're not going to just be talking heads today. My hope is that we will be hearing from you, holding us accountable for the work that we're doing. We have major work to do around that budget. We only have 9 members in the Senate. But I can tell you absolutely, those members, we were working on Monday night to 9 and 10 o'clock at night on this budget. My staff was there. We've got lots of work to do on the budget as it's coming to the Senate. And so as we're meeting with groups everywhere, I was in several protests. When it was raining cats and dogs, I was in that protest.
I saw you.
And then, amen, we were in the protest with the CEA. So we're going to be doing this in multiple ways to ensure and let folk know in the State House, because it's your State House, we work for you, that these issues that are compelling, that are hurting families and children, this issue about access to health care, it is serious. And I think the representative has said it very, very clearly. It will have dire implications for many of our families regarding Medicaid. I'm 76 years old. And so for our seniors and for those that have played by the rules, have now retired on fixed incomes and have to worry about property taxes. I served on the Property Tax Reform Committee. So we have lots of work to do, and we're going to be there and working vigorously. I can guarantee you to make sure that we are representing you in a way. We know we got an uphill battle, but that does not deter us. By the public coming out, and we heard hundreds of testimonies regarding the budget, and we still need to have that. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you everyone for introducing yourselves. I think now we're going to open up the audience for questions. And so if you have a question to one of the panelists, if you want to raise your hand, Ann will come to you with the mic. So, the mic over there.
But I'm not going to run.
Hi, you can use some clear words. All right, so all the concerns are valid, but my main concern is about public schools and keeping public schools. I think that's what unites us as a people, is to have good public schools. So I currently have a child who's in the Columbus City schools at Carl's, and as a sophomore, and one thing is about these private schools that get vouchers. Like, I think like some of it is, to me, is the semantics, because these schools are not private schools, they're public schools, publicly funded private schools. And I think like something, the semantics of like us calling them private schools when their money comes from the public. And I think like we need to say that, and that they are not, the rules that they play by are not the rules of the rest of the purely public schools that are getting money from their public have to play by. So I think like we would elevate that discussion that private schools aren't private schools, they get public funding. So they need to be called publicly funded private schools. Thank you.
One of the things that we didn't talk about in our introductions was part of the budget specific actually to what you're talking about. So yes, we have opened the doors to vouchers to the tune of over $1 billion. One of the things that is in the House version of the budget is not only opening the doors to chartered private schools, but also opening the door to non-chartered schools. And if you don't know what a non-chartered school is, these are schools that made a choice that they did not want to go through a basic chartering process with the state of Ohio to have a contract in place with a basic understanding of what the agreement was, what their responsibilities were to the state. These are schools that chose that they did not want any public dollars, and so they did not charter. And I'll give you one very clear example. If you've ever heard of Bishop Sycamore, which is a fake school, that is an example of a non-chartered school. One of the components of the House budget is that we would create educational savings accounts and use your dollars, our dollars, public tax dollars, to go toward these non-chartered schools. It's unacceptable. This is not something that I think that the average taxpayer would be okay with. But you're right. I mean, some of it is how we talk about it. I don't know that the average taxpayer understands that with vouchers, the growth in the number of students who attend private schools has only jumped up 2%. Most of the people that took a voucher were already attending these schools. And in addition to that, 20% of those vouchers are going to families whose income is 6 or 7 figures.
Whoa.
So I think we need to talk about it more. I think it's confusing to people. I think the language about choice has been very misleading and confusing. I'm a parent, I've got 3 kids, and you better believe that I made the best choice for every single one of my kids, who are each different and have different needs, of course I exercised my choice as a parent to make the best decisions for them. And every parent, every guardian who has children should be making the best choice. This isn't a conversation about choice. This is a conversation about where local tax dollars should be going, and the Constitution says that there is one system of public schools that is to be funded, and until we get to the place where that is fully funded, that's really the end of the conversation.
Come on.
A couple things I'd like to add. As far as private schools, they don't have the same accountability measures that public schools do as far as academic standards, as far as financial reporting. Even though they are accepting public funds. And there have been attempts in the legislature to introduce those accountability measures, and they've been voted down. Most recently in the last assembly, right at the last minute, it didn't even go out of committee. So our legislators need to hear from you that your tax dollars are going to pay for schools of kids who don't have to take those state tests, whose schools don't have to have those state report cards that, in my opinion, are meaningless anyway. But if you take public funds, you should be accountable the same way that public schools are. The vouchers, there is a lawsuit currently going on. If you don't know about it, it's called Vouchers for Ohio. They have a website, and there's over 300 school districts in the state that are paying money to be a part of this lawsuit and suing the state on the unconstitutionality of them funding private education, especially religious education. So it's a really important lawsuit that you should do some research on.
Will it be going to federal courts?
It's in the state court system, so it's currently at the trial court level in Franklin County in front of one of our local trial court judges.
I worry about our Supreme Court.
Yeah, so do we.
Yeah, I mean, pray for us first, Supreme Court. So the one thing I want to add, and this, I know this conversation came up pretty regularly on the House Finance Committee during discussions. It was related to our IEP students.
Yes.
And the number, so you have two things going on. One, it costs more to provide the level of support to these young students.
Yeah.
And if that parent wanted to have choice, it is up to the school's discretion to accept them.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So how can a family truly have choice when the school don't want them?
Yeah.
And so the issue here is, as we are reducing the amount of money that we're giving public schools, we're also seeing increases in the cost to provide education to these students. So what are these school districts going to do? And so that is what's at play here. We're not supporting the most challenged students in our districts across the state, right? And so many, time and time again, school districts, treasurers, they came in and they talked about, why are you defunding us when we are responsible, literally responsible, to teach the most challenging of our youth across Ohio? And that is a travesty on a humanity level that we all need to talk more about.
Yeah.
And that's a really good point. I'm going to be very quick, but I'm glad that you brought up the IEP piece, because my son attends Columbus City Schools and he is in special education. He has an IEP, and we've been through situations where we've tried to utilize choice. And Senator Craig and Representative Jarrells know this very clearly. The charter schools, not that they don't want them, they don't have the support to even take the children anyway, because they don't have the resources. They have someone who comes in maybe once or twice a week to try to help out. But when you have a child who needs that extra assistance every day, you know, they cannot be there. And so I'm so glad that you brought that point up, because it's a real issue. And then if we talk about the fact that we're defunding schools in the first place, a large percentage of children who go to Columbus City Schools actually large percentage of these students need some type of accommodation in the first place. Yeah. So if we cut the funding, if we defund these schools, we're putting, maybe I think the number was 20-some-odd% of students, we're putting them in harm's way. And so I'm so glad you brought that up so I could add that.
So one other thing that happens in this budget is that oftentimes schools plan ahead. They look at how are we planning for major, repairs, construction, bugs, computers, whatever. So one of the ways that they're hiding this is saying it's going to provide one-time property tax relief for the community by getting rid of what we call carryover or rollover. So right now it's 30% is what schools can carry over year to year as they plan for repairs, they plan for things for the future. That is going to go away, so they won't be able to plan ahead, which means that they will be coming back more frequently with levies, going back to their communities saying, hey, we need more money for schools. Because instead of rewarding the schools that are good stewards of money, we are saying, no, we're going to disguise it as property tax relief and tell you all this is what we're doing. So it's the direct damage that they're doing and then the indirect damage that we're seeing.
That's really good. You got a point, Kathryn.
So,
Hi there, this is actually related to this conversation. Have they put an adjustment in for the match required by local school districts for new buildings in the old school facilities commission? In other words, much of that money they're saving, they save so they have enough money to pay for a new building. That just might be worth looking at, and look at those districts that are in line. Could be in a good district, you know?
Yeah.
So the answer is no. The way that the budget started, the other terrible thing that was part of the governor's proposal was that they defined an unused school facility as a building that had, I think the number was at 60% or less student population in that building, and that was defined as an unused school facility that made it automatically available to a charter school to take over. Thankfully, we were able to negotiate some of that language, but there is still some lack of clarity when a school building is actually coming down. So for example, if a district is building a new building and they're going to take down the old building, there's still some language, Senator Craig, that you guys need to fix over in the Senate related to the land that is adjacent to the building that is coming down. So I guess just to your point, one of the things that this was my first time through the budget cycle, and I understand we all come with different backgrounds, different areas of expertise, but it became very apparent very quickly that especially related to school funding, there are just differences in what people understand, which again makes sense, but for some it didn't seem to matter that they didn't understand. They were going to plow forward and make decisions that negatively impact our kids, our school districts, our public school staff.
One of the things on property taxes specifically is that this General Assembly has been thinking about property taxes for a while, right? There's a lot of consensus actually around the fact that people are really struggling with property taxes. It's bipartisan actually, which is a rarity in our state legislature, that people are united around a problem. And so there was an entire process where the General Assembly went through the Property Tax Commission and proposed solutions. However, this 30% cap on carryover for school districts was not one of them.
No.
Policy Matters Ohio recently released a brief where we analyzed the connection between property tax relief and these caps. There isn't one. This is essentially a made-up proposal that was something that they threw together to try to give voters the guise of property tax relief, rather than going for things that we know actually work. One of the proposals that we're really fond of is a tax circuit breaker, which would essentially, when these things would essentially provide property tax relief by when the property tax is raised to a certain level, the state can come in and cover part of the share of the property tax relief. There are actual things that we know work from around the country, but they're not choosing to use those, right? They're choosing to go with these made-up policy proposals that are supposed to give you the guise of relief without actually giving you a solution.
It's called lying.
I just want to say one quick thing. When we hear those building capacity numbers, to be very, very cautious on them. I live over in the Hilltop neighborhood. I was very involved with local parent groups around the school closing within Columbus City Schools that was being discussed last year. And when I saw the numbers coming in about what capacity a lot of our buildings was at, I was kind of surprised because I've been in these buildings and I know they are filled. But we have one classroom that could hold 30 traditional classroom students, but it's being used as our gifted program right now because we don't have a room built for 15 people. And those 15 students at a time are being pulled out of their other classrooms. Same with ESL. And my daughter is on an IEP and has special testing accommodations where she can go to a different room for testing. So be very, very cautious when you hear people say, well, these buildings and are talking about government waste and all these things. Teachers and principals are figuring out how to use their current space to offer a modern education. Buildings that were built long, long time ago when the idea was throw 30 students in a room with one adult. And that's the best way of education. We know that's not the best way to do education anymore. And it costs more and requires new resources and new investments.
No, go ahead, ma'am, I'm sorry.
First of all, thank you all for being here. This question is a little bit specific to some of our elected officials. Oh, I don't know. There you go. Is it working? Oh, sorry. First of all, thank you all for being here. This is directed at our elected officials. Given that the Democrats have been unable to stop this stuff so far, could you guys outline some concrete steps that you plan to take to do differently this time?
Wow. There's a lot to chew on that question. But I'm going to stand for this one just a little bit because that question is so important. And I'll answer it this way because there is no silver bullet. We all got here by voting. Folk trusted us enough. Not perfect, but trusted us enough to be in elected office. And when we get there, it's both a privilege, an opportunity to serve, but an awesome responsibility. We hold that seriously. And if one does not do that, they don't need to be in public office. But here's where a direct answer to your question. One of the things that we did, we were able to increase our numbers in the Senate because we were down to 7, and we were able to increase that number, to 9. We're looking at also working to do this, but not just the numbers, but how we impact the numbers. We have got to make certain because we're looking at somebody that's looking at being governor.
Yeah. That's it.
Be worried.
That's it. Yeah. Be worried. Be very worried.
But I would also say this. Never lose your hope and never lose your faith. Because Indivisibles and groups like that, and those of us that have come out of the civil rights movement and when people marched for 365 days, they didn't have a telephone, they didn't have what's these phones we have?
They're too smart for me.
Yeah, right, they can all be smartphones. Because y'all know I would go to a phone booth. So they didn't have the smartphones. But they met, there were people that were cleaning houses, working in steel mills, as well as the intelligentsia of people that were in universities came together. And then we had the Civil Rights Act of 1964, the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and the Fair Housing Act of 1968. How did they get it done? people organizing and coming together. We're there again. Because as elected officials, because we got to get the numbers, because right now in the House, the numbers, they can have a
34.
Right. They have a supermajority in the House. They have a supermajority in the Senate. We come to work every day saying, yeah, you got the numbers, but we got the plan. So we're going to, we got to continue to work with you all. We cannot do this work without you. People come down, hundreds of people come down to give testimony. We're in the battle right now of our lives. I have 11 grandchildren and 5 great-grandchildren. We can't do this by ourselves. Elected officials, I think you asked that question because we've got to work together as House and Senate members, but also with the county commissioners, with Columbus City Council, because as elected, when the State House, we vote on everything from the death penalty all the way up and down. And I have voted against the death penalty, as Deacon knows. And so your voice matters. You are not powerless. Hold us and come, and when we're not doing it, also check us. But right now, it's even more important because with these numbers, and I wonder, the state of Ohio has not always been like this.
No.
We're better than this.
Yes, we are.
And so I will just say every day, day and night, as long as I have breath, we're going to be working hard on behalf of our families and children. And as legislators, that's what we have to do. We're compelled to do that. And so, but it's got to be like you're saying. I call all 99 members of the House, all 33 members of the Senate, and say to them, these are issues that's important. Because they can't get off the hook on this. You know that these folks, we're here because we care about the issues that many of you care about. The other folks have got to know, and we've got to do, and writing them, emailing them, and using every process, because we're just right there.
And no one paid to come in this room today. All of these people showed up. So I want to applaud that.
So I'll just let the other person go with their hand up.
So it's on, right? Okay. So I am a former school librarian. So my life intersects both education and this beautiful place that we are sitting. So I would like to know what is happening to this public library fund, because as far as I'm concerned, public libraries and school libraries are essential to every child's education.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the tricky thing about what they've done to us in the House version of the budget. What they've done, related both to libraries and to schools, is that the dollar amount is not a decrease. So it's very confusing. If you look at the House version of the budget, we can't easily say that there's been a cut in funding to libraries and to public education. But the terrible thing that they've done for both libraries and public education is that they have taken the formula and put it in the shredder. So what that means is that while everybody may be held harmless this year, when we come back and do the budget in another 2 years, the libraries and the schools are going to have to come hat in hand again and beg for us to do something, and also have no way to plan budgets because they have no idea what to expect anymore going forward when we do that. I don't know if my colleague on Finance Committee, I think, wants to maybe add to that.
And while my good colleague, Representative Beryl and Piccolantonio talked about the funding piece, the other piece they did was they started hiding books.
That's right.
Right? And so books that, whether it's our LGBTQA community, whether it's folks who, and I'll tell you this all started, from my understanding, from someone, a colleague, seeing a tampon in the bathroom. It was like, there was like something that, like it was literally like in a men's bathroom. And I don't know about you, but there's single dads out here who's walking their daughters into a library. They're sitting down, maybe working with them on a project, and guess what? They gotta go to their bathroom, right? Because life is life, y'all. And out of that one scenario, what we are finding is we're beginning to hide away books that tell the true experience of Ohioans all across this race.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to tell you all, and this is what pisses me off the most about this whole process. This is a manufactured economic downturn in Ohio. We have a $3.9 billion rainy day fund, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that again for folks who didn't hear me. We have a $3.9 billion rainy day fund, the highest historic it's ever been in Ohio history. And yet we're cutting.
What rainy day are they waiting for?
Well, it's raining pouring right now. I don't know about you. And it upsets me. Because when we talk about the real needs of Ohioans, we have the money to do what's right.
Right.
And so when you talk about a budget being about people's values, this budget, when you remove the dollars and cents, when you see the cuts that they're making, when you see the harm that's being done to people in every single part of Ohio, suburban, rural, urban, Appalachian, the Amish country, you name it, it's the values. And so to your question earlier about what we're going to do differently, we have to talk about the values.
Yes.
What we believe Ohio can be versus what they believe Ohio can be. And that distinction alone, if you believe that every single rural Ohioan deserves to have the affordable health care access, and my colleagues do not, we need to speak truth to power. If you believe that every single community should have seniors staying in their homes because of property taxes that are affordable, and my colleagues want to shift the burden more on homeowners, particularly our most vulnerable seniors, we need to talk about it, right? But we can't do the value work alone. We have to do it collectively. That's the only way that I truly think that and believe that we can save Ohio. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is not directly related to your, what we've been talking about, but it is, of course. For the representatives here, one of the things that you said is that you're here for us, you represent us. Can we say that about the people on the other side?
I couldn't hear that.
Can we say that about the people on the other side of the aisle?
No.
Because one wonders is what is it like to work with these people? I mean, here it's like we send letters, we send emails, we call them. I feel like I don't have any representation here in Ohio or in Washington. I live in Fairfield County. It's part of Columbus. It's part of Columbus, but it's Fairfield County. I don't feel like I have any representation in Congress or in the State House. And so it's just, it's frustrating. I know, say, call them, keep the pressure on, but they don't listen. They have never listened. They don't even respond half the time. They don't even tell you they disagree with you. They just ignore us. And so what can we do in that?
Until the plastics company is getting ready to close.
Yeah.
What's that?
Until the plastics company is
Yeah.
getting ready to close.
Yeah.
They'll show up there. You saw Houston and Marino there.
Yeah.
You should go there.
Yeah.
They can't go to a town hall like this.
There you go.
They don't come to the town halls.
No, anything that happens with big business, they'll be there. So follow the money.
Oh, yeah. So what do we do? What's it like for you?
So we tried. Part of the biggest issue right now is gerrymandered districts.
That's right. That's
Because
right.
politicians are choosing their voters. I'm a victim, or however you want to put that. I ran for District 11, which was a new district created here in Franklin County. But then because of gerrymandering, I ended up running for a different district. And I think we tried to do fair districts. But because of the fact that we've had Republican power for so long, ballot language was changed. People were confused.
Yeah.
And they ended up voting against their interests because most people want fair districts. So I think we need to look at 2030. We need to look at how can we get back to fair districts? What can we do to make sure that our politicians represent us?
Well, 2026, but she means that's when you read, the next new districts will be 2020. Yeah, she's right.
2031, we will draw lines.
Yep.
Yeah, so she's right in a sense, y'all, so. I know
They ignored the law, they ignored the Constitution.
2026 matters because it is the first time, 2026, we will have non-incumbents running for the statewide seats.
Yes.
So the Constitution, the commission that draws the lines is made up of the governor, the secretary of state, the auditor, and then you've got the speaker of the house, the senate president.
Right.
So when we vote in 2026, we've got essentially open seats, non-incumbents running. Ideally, we will be successful in 2026 so that those people are still in those seats in 2031. Wait, that doesn't sound right.
2030.
In 2030 when we're redrawing lines.
Yeah.
It's
convoluted, y'all, that's the whole thing. One of them
the
days.
district lines are based on census, which is done every 10 years.
Right.
So that's
why she said 2030.
Right.
But to touch on your question, I wanna kind of answer this. I don't want you to feel powerless, and I don't want you to feel hopeless. Because when you think about, because we always got to talk about the governor's proposed budget, because it always gives context. So when you think about public education, and when you think about the libraries, all of those things in the governor's proposed budget were tremendously cut, okay? And after the finance committee decided to make some compromises with how small, whatever they may have been, they basically flat funded a lot of those things, especially public libraries, to say, okay, so no, we ain't gonna cut you, we just gonna put you right back where you were. Before it was cut, and I'm going somewhere with this. The reason why the public libraries even got publicly or flat funded was because of you all. Okay? It was your fight. It was you all showing up there. It was you all sending letters. It was you all making calls. It was you all catching them in the hallways. Like, listen, we got to do something about this. This was real organizing because they very much could have not listened to my colleagues who were on the committees and did whatever the world they wanted to do. However, they gave us crumbs. It was crumbs. Now, I'm going to be honest, gotta call a spade a spade. It was crumbs, but what they could have did is not what they did do. And what they did was because of the people. So I don't want you to feel powerless, because you do have a voice. And I want people to understand that they should continue to utilize your voices. I know it gets rough and stuff with your Afro buzz, I get it, but you gotta keep going. Like, you gotta keep being persistent. It might not be the way you want it, but if you stay consistent, you'll get something. I always use this line that I got from Denzel Washington. He was doing an interview and he said, listen, I'm from around the way. I'm leaving with something. And I know that it sucks that we are in these positions that sometimes we have got to take crumbs, but we leaving with something in the state, in the space in which we are in now. Now to my dear brother's question over here, what is it can we do? Yes, we have to continue to organize. We've got to continue to show up. We've got to continue to send letters. We have got to not get powerless. We cannot get weary in well-doing. We've got to keep going because it works. We just seen it in real time. The governor's proposed budget cut almost $58 million from Columbus City schools. We got it flat funded for the next, 2 years or so, okay? They were willing to just do whatever he had said to do. But because of you all, because of advocacy groups, they decided not to do that. So, show up, send your letters, do all the things, call. Don't stop doing that. Don't think that it's useless. Don't feel like it does not play a part. That's number one. The other thing my colleague, Senator Craig, touched on that is so important is voting. I tell people all the time, the city of Columbus, the city or Franklin County will do this, Cuyahoga County, and Hamilton County. When we think about statewide elections, we have the power to change the trajectory of this state. just because of how populated it is we are. Now, I know that we should be trying to think about what do we do about state house districts, and that's another conversation. We got to be willing to organize in other areas. That is true. But when you think about the state as a whole, we have the power over that. So let's talk about how do we organize. Because if we're only willing to organize in our own silos and go talking to people who we know are going to vote, how productive is it that we are really going to be? We got to be willing to go in different areas. And then we also have to look at the number of people who are not registered to vote and which areas that they are in and go get them registered to vote. See, this is not going to change overnight, but we have to know that we do have power. We have power in this very county that we are sitting in today. How many people is in Franklin County? Almost 2 million people? I think it is. Yeah. So almost similarly in Cuyahoga County, a little short in Hamilton County, we can make these changes. It's just up to us as to whether we want to do it. We can't do it alone. It's not going to happen alone. It's going to be all of us. And if it is, and I'll let you get to your question, sis, but if it is, we come together, we can change the trajectory of the state. So it's organizing. It really is. So still keep doing what it is we're doing, but understand we got power in our own counties, and we got to be willing to do things differently. Because if we just go on and talk to people in our own neighborhoods who we know we're going to vote, that's one thing. Listen, if I'm going out getting people in my district that is, I'm just call it like it is because it's my district, predominantly black, severely economically disadvantaged, we got to get out there and talk to them. People we know won't vote. My people are going to vote. And if we get people registered in my district, they're going to vote, and they're going to vote the right way. The reality is we got to figure out why they ain't voting in the first place. Is it apathy? Do they feel like people are not hearing their needs? All these different things. But we have got to be willing to do it together and understand we really do have power. It's just dressed up in overalls and looks like work, and that's what stops people from wanting to be a part of the process. So I'll leave it, I'll end with that, but that is the reality. Where are we organized?
I don't have a question for the panel, but I do have a response to you. One thing, smartphones have made people dumb. So people get their information from sound bites. They're not discerning. They cannot distinguish what is real and what is not real. One of the things that we need to stop doing is labeling Democrat or Republican. Fresh air is fresh air to a Republican, Democrat, or Independent. We have to call our family and friends on it. If you're in church, writing newsletters and educating people. When plants close in Appalachia, when factories close, the plastics factory, when mines close, that affects the infrastructure. Fracking affects the infrastructure. Poor quality toxins in the air affect breathing, it affects birth rates, it affects your drinking water, and we need to call people on that. It's not a Democrat problem, it's not a Republican problem, it is our problem.
That's good.
And when you don't label policies as Democrat or Republican, Democratic public policies always win out.
Right.
Yeah. So, labels matter.
When you label something, you can automatically disregard it or discriminate against it. An issue, lead, is an issue.
Healthcare is an issue.
Healthcare is an issue. Toxins is an issue. What does plastic productions result in? And we have to tell people, if ethylene and all of these gases are released into the air and mixed with other toxins that's in the air, that's going to leach into your soil, that's going to leach into your drinking water. And our infrastructure is not up to par to extrapolate those type of toxins. So you can go and buy all the single-use plastics you want. You're still breathing that air. So we have to remove those labels. I said all that to say that.
Ma'am, let me thank you for your comment also. There has been times, and let's be honest, where there's been members of the Senate that have decided with members in my caucus. Not a lot of them, but on some core issues, because we have, there are some issues that we simply cannot draw and draw support, and we will not because of our core issues. But there are some things where we've been able, where there have been members to certainly build collaboration around. Issues are complex, they're serious. This issue 2, and I know everybody didn't agree with it, but that's a bipartisan bill. I was the joint sponsor on that bill because we needed to make sure that we had roads, bridges, water, sewage, all of that thing that just passed was a joint bill out of the Senate. There was a bill in the House, but I was a joint sponsor with me and another member on the other side of the aisle on that bill. There are times we've got to find a way to build coalitions around that issue. There are other times, because these issues are so complex and so serious that we simply will not find agreement. But there are some times, and I appreciate you raising that issue because there are lots of issues. Our children need to be fed. Yes. It's not only in urban areas, yes, but it's in rural areas. And then we've got to say to our colleagues in rural areas that your children need to be fed. Your children need to be housed. Reynolds and I have several bills together. There are other bills in the House I know that members have introduced. We're just going to amend the budget to put some of those bills in this. We're trying to move those now in this budget that are bipartisan. We got it, but that doesn't happen by accident. You mentioned the libraries, and I will say to you categorically, the legislators already mentioned, because of you, we can't say that enough. They weren't going to support the libraries. I met with so many library folk, and that's what moved that needle. But this issue, you're right. I mean, in a perfect world, I wish we could do more of that. But the fact of the matter is, this is a political process. And the work that we're doing is obviously, we represent, but here's the thing to that. Is that when somebody I know when they call my office, and I'm sure when they call other offices, we don't ask them if they're Republican or a Democrat. We just say, can we help you? That's it, that's it. Now, we've got a nomenclature for us to get into office. But part of that is I've had Republicans to vote for me, and I'm sure, and other members, because if you stand on what you believe, and this ain't just overnight, you can look at my record. There are things you might like, but you'll know exactly where I stand. And these other members, you know, you can look at it. We have efforts reports that we just handed in one last week that we're held accountable for. So you can look at our record, but we've got to find ways. I look, in a perfect world we can do it, but when we have extremes, and right now, unfortunately, what we're operating for, and it's costing the lives of children and families. And we can't tolerate that. We've got to fight. And that's where we are right now.
To kind of build on some of that, you know, I started doing policy work within the nonprofit sector about 20 years ago, working on homeless and transitional youth policy issues and working directly with these kids who had experienced homelessness and housing instability. And I feel 20 years ago, there'd be Democratic ideas and there'd be Republican ideas towards how to solve a problem. You know, and I say, great, let's argue it out, let's have that conversation, let's figure out if it's a compromise or win people. But people, I felt 20 years ago, were working toward similar goals. I don't see that as the case anymore. I now see people who say, I don't care that there are children who are hungry. I don't care about housing people in other communities. I only care about who I care about. And I will be blunt, as a leader in the Lutheran Church, I will place the blame for this on Christian nationalism. Because Christian nationalism says who is in and who is out, and gives us justification to say these people are unworthy. Come on. Of being in our community. They're unworthy of food, they're unworthy of good education, they don't belong. And we can look at Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, transphobia, anti-LGBTQ youth, homophobia, all these things that we see on the rise in our communities right now can go back to this. And I see Christian nationalism and white supremacy and toxic masculinity as diseases. And the reality is, where do they grow? They grow and expand when there's fear and anxiety in our communities. So as people are more scared about if they can afford their bills, if people are more scared about if kids are gonna have good schools, this leads to that fear and anxiety that leads people then to fall back into these camps. And white Christian nationalism is exploiting people in our neighborhoods, in our communities, in our churches, because they're afraid of what the economy and what the world's going to have in the future. And instead of saying, hey, let's go fix the housing system, let's go fix our schools, they say, go and blame trans kids. Go blame those books on those library shelves.
And they do it with intentionality.
Yes, very much.
That's right.
As I told you all, I gotta run, but you all, I'm literally like tag in to one of the baddest sisters out here in all the land, leader Allison Russo. But I do want to say one thing before I go. One, I love every single one of you. And I think sometimes people ask, how do you change America, the nation? I just think we gotta hug each other a little bit more, a little tighter. I really do believe that. I feel like we don't know how to be neighbors again, which is part of our issue on a humanitarian level. But the other piece I wanna say is, as it relates to this budget or any just bad bill, I mean, we're fighting diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-diversity, equity, inclusion legislation. We're fighting, anti-LGBTQA community, like trans, like we are fighting so many things. And it's so interesting to me, and I say this, every time we are in session, both in the Senate and in the House, we pray. We pray. We pray. And we talk about service and serving the least of these and thinking strategically about how are we gonna make Ohio better. And I feel like I'm praying to something different. And the truth is, there is a disconnect between the prayers that we are saying every time we're in a session and the real lived experience of Ohioans. And we're gonna be fighting, all of us, to align it. Because at the end of the day, that's how I believe we're gonna build Ohio that we all deserve. Thank you all, God bless. I'm really excited to be here with all of you. Leader Russo, y'all, Leader Russo.
Thank you, Representative Jarrells. Quick hello, Allison Russo, State Rep here in the 7th House District, so I have Greenview, Upper Arlington, Ohio State campus area, some of Clintonville, and my 4th term in the House. Also have the privilege of serving as the House Minority Leader. Didn't hear what the last question was, so I will wait until the next question, but glad to be here. Sorry I'm running late, I was actually coming down from Cleveland, but glad I made it in time, at least for these last 40 minutes or so.
Rep. Russo, when we started, everyone talked about the issue in the budget that was most important to them, that they thought most needed to be fixed. And maybe you want to start by just telling us what your issue is.
You're going to make me pick just one?
We had so many.
Well, I mean, to me, there are two really key critical issues because they will fundamentally, I think, do lasting damage in the state. The first is public education, without a doubt. Sustained attacks, and there are multiple ways that public education is attacked. And I'm sure some of my other reps have talked about this, whether it's